The arrogance of the ANC and more broadly the government around the world is oftentimes truly astounding to me. Now, government, this is why I say it all over the world, is always a little bit arrogant. Most government officials, where the original idea of government was that instead of having kings who believe themselves to be superior to the people, we would have representatives from the people who would govern on our behalf. They would be no more than administrators whose only real job was to do the jobs that none of us wanted to do. So, for example, take care of refuse. None of us have the time or really the energy to, after a long day of work, drive down to the landfill to drop off our refuse. And so we said, hey, you have as little skills as possible. You really can't do it anywhere. You can't really make it anywhere else in the economy. How about you become the administrator of refuse? And maybe, sewage and stuff, right? Because that's pretty much what the government is mostly adequately equipped to deal with. Menial jobs, because most people who go into government have no ability to operate anywhere else in the economy. That's why they become government officials. The issue in South Africa, I think, is more pronounced than that, because while most governments around the world have this sense of arrogance, the South African government's sense of arrogance goes so far as they believe themselves to be appointed by God, right? As famously said by Jacob Zuma, the ANC will rule until Jesus returns. And his reasoning for that is because he believes the ANC has a special mandate from above. Now, of course, none of them are Christians. Some of them are Muslim, like Milady Pandor. Others are atheists or believe in some spirits and ghosts and stuff from their ancestors. But they're not Christians. They don't adhere to the Christian faith. But they do believe that they have a divine mandate to rule the people, which is why they call shit like the COVID stuff a family meeting. And Ramaphosa is the head of the family because that's divinely inspired. Even though he's not my head of my family, we're not a family. What are you talking about? I was basically sitting through those things and laughing, just realizing how they're going to inconvenience my life even further. But never mind. So one of the things that I think strikes me, and I think a lot of other South Africans, about this sort of arrogance from the government is they themselves are destroying this country, and then they preach to us about how we must be careful, because if we don't, they'll destroy it even faster. This story came out yesterday with Paul Mashatile going around to the Western Cape, to specifically the Oeverberg district in the Western Cape, and he had a couple of choice things to say to the people there. Now, I'll read his exact words here. There must be negotiations, engagements, and by the way, government does buy the land. We have been doing so we are going to continue to do that. So let's negotiate. Parliament has passed a law to allow government to expropriate land for public use, but in most cases, that's not our starting point. Now, for those of you that are politically not as in tune, although most of you are, that's a threat. Paul Mashatile is trying to say the mean part in as nice a way as possible, but it is a threat. He's effectively saying, either you come to the negotiating table and you talk to us so that we can take part of your farm and give it to other people, or maybe take the whole farm and give it to other people, or we just take the farm. These are your options. Now, government has been buying farms, but lately government has more and more stopped buying farms at the actual value of the farm. And I'm assuming that's going to continue to happen as the government continues to run out of money. The problem that I have with this, and I have always said, I think there is a very good way of handling land transfers, right? There is a way where you could work with farmers to maybe get a farmer to give 10 or 20% of their farm to, say, some of the people in the rural villages around the farm, and then help these villagers to farm, right? Maybe give them loans, and they have to repay those loans at a very decent interest rate. So the farmer has the incentive, because there's a financial incentive there, but also the people there get to learn how to farm properly and get to make a lot of money from that. I don't see a problem with that, but that would have to be on a sort of free will basis, right? Where no one is compelled to do it, but if you want to, that's probably a good place to start. This is not Paul Mashatile's starting point. He's effectively saying you can either do it willingly or we'll just force you to do it. These are your options. So effectively, you can't do it willingly. You are forced to do it. But let's just look at the arrogance of this government. The government of South Africa, the ANC, has destroyed farming in this country, not only because of their asinine land reform policies that continuously put farmers at risk. When farmers go to the bank to borrow money so that they can plant, a lot of the banks have to ask themselves, is this a worthwhile investment for me? Do I know if you're going to have your farm in a year or two from now? Are you going to be able to pay this back? Who knows? Farming is already a very delicate process, and most of the time, most farmers fail. It's not as easy as people think. But the other problem is that the economy of the world is so interconnected that if one part of the economy fails, it might not be directly related to this part, but it will have an impact. Take, for example, railways. Railways in South Africa has been in terminal deterioration for about 15 years. Transnet is broke. The harbours in South Africa, absolutely dysfunctional. All of this impacts farmers because farming is tons. And a lot of farmers will move hundreds, if not thousands of tons of food across the country from their farms every single harvest season. These tons of food needs to be transported. If you can't do it by rail, which is by far the cheapest and most efficient, you have to do it by truck. This adds significant cost because where a truck can take at most between 20 and 30 tons, a train could take between 100 and 200 tons of the same product. So you have this thing where I could move my entire crop that I've just harvested in one go by train, much cheaper, or I can use 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 trucks to get this to where it needs to go. From where it goes, it then has to go on trucks once it's packaged back to the harbours because, again, the railways don't work. And this is just one part of it, right? That's not even talking about the fiscal situation of South Africa. That's not talking about the employment situation in South Africa, because employment will also have an impact on farmers. If you're, and I've made this point before, but if you're in South Africa and you're employing people, I used to own my own business. I know how difficult this is. Unless an employee outright steals from you, it's almost impossible to get rid of a bad employee because you have to give them a warning, then you have to give them a second warning, then you have to give them a final warning, then you have to have a whole hearing. And if the CCMA goes, well, this is not a fireable offense, then you go back to training them, and then you have to go through the whole warning process again. And you have to continuously do this until you can convince the CCMA, whose only real objective is to make sure that you don't fire your employee, until you can convince them that, hey, this guy is costing me money. He's losing my business money, and I can't get rid of him. So this puts another amount of strain on farmers. Then you talk about farmers' safety, rural safety. This will put yet more strain on farmers because all of this will affect the loans, the percentage interest that is charged on loans. It will affect the feeling of farmers. There might be plenty of farmers in this country that would love to go into farming, but because it's such an unsafe place to be, they're just not going to go there. So ultimately, we are running into this problem where the government created the financial constraints that put farmers in on the back foot. And now Paul Mashatile is stepping in and saying, hey, you can either willingly sell your farm or we'll just take it. So in other words, you can't willingly sell your farm. You're going to sell your farm under duress, but we're going to word it in such a way that you think this was your idea. It's disgusting. It's terrible, like truly terrible, but this is where we are. Because this government continues to say, if we're not the whole solution to the problem, we will be the entire problem. But we will not allow anyone else to fix the problems of this country. Either we provide the solution, which is never the solution, it's just more problems, or we'll provide the problem. You guys have a choice. Make it. Sorry, guys. I'm fuming over this. It annoys me to no end. And I needed to share that frustration with all of you. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of this. Have you been impacted by the terrible policies of this government, especially if it's been directly? I would love to read from you because I know all of us have been indirectly affected. But if you have a story of a direct effect that the government has had on you, I'd love to read about that in the comment section down below. As always, massive shout out to all of you that love this channel. Keep liking, commenting, subscribing. I really appreciate that because it does help. Huge thank you to all of the patrons and the YouTube channel members. To become a YouTube member, just hit the join button right below this video. As always, ladies and gentlemen, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.